Hey everybody, it's Zane Donani. Um, Decided that I wanted to just kind of put myself out there, do some content. I've been posting a lot on X lately, just trying to put different news and notes out there, and then providing my own like fantasy content, guidance, all sorts of different things. So I figured, you know what, I'll just put myself out there and spend some time breaking down some of the latest news in 10 minutes or less, and then some of the analytics that I've also posted. So I'm literally going to go through this and just share my screen and go through it with everybody. So we'll start with Roma Dunes. So yesterday there was some big breaking news about Roma Dunes saying that his foot was basically not the same as it was in the past, and definitely concerning to me, especially as you have two ascending players in Colston Loveland and Luther Burden um, out there. I expect Roma Dunes to have his ADP drop in a lot of places. I'd probably give it a week for everything to settle, but definitely concerned about that right now. Um, and I'm going to try to go through everything as quickly as I possibly can. So, uh, yesterday at Giants practice, there was some notes that Isaiah Likely was catching a lot of passes. Theo Johnson wasn't there. Obviously, Malik Neighbors isn't there. Darius Slayton's still out. So, just something to note, especially as we look at the fantasy season with them signing him to a big deal. There's a lot of upside for Isaiah Likely, even if he doesn't grade out in projections very well, because people are thinking, maybe he doesn't have a full route tree or doesn't spend all of his time on the field. But there's a possibility that he does, and you would want to capture that upside. Mike Evans is coming off some injuries, collarbone, hamstring. People are always concerned about his hamstrings. George Kittle is doing work on the side and should be ready for week 1. I'm not really that concerned about Mike Evans right now. Obviously, you get injured in the season, but you're always thinking about upside, and Mike Evans being in a good offense with a good quarterback and a good play caller is always a good thing to me, especially at his current price. And then with Kittle, people are making recoveries on Achilles tears way quicker these days. And so I'm not very concerned about him either. Maybe his effectiveness, but I think at his price right now, his effectiveness can be really strong at the end of the season when it matters the most. We saw Chigakonkwo catch a pass yesterday with Jalen Lane and Treylon Burks. That was just a tweet that's basically mentioning like who's out there, right? Because everybody's wondering who's out there for the Commanders. Darnell Washington got his payday. I'm expecting a little bit more 12 personnel out of them than we initially thought. Ricky Pearsall was missing practice yesterday. Don't know the details on why that is, but always a concern for Ricky Pearsall because he's just a guy that, you always think about like, hey, this guy just hasn't been healthy. He has great separation metrics last year and everything too, but just can't be on the field. So we need that guy to be on the field. He has a really strong opportunity this year playing kind of the Z receiver with Stribling kind of taking on that F role. Kalen Black and Jordan James are in an RB2 battle. I think that's important, especially as people are looking to get the handcuff to Christian McCaffrey. There's a clip where I saw Colston Loveland lining up as an inline tight end. So I think that's important because he spent a lot more time in the slot last year. If he can get more playing time, which everyone obviously expects with a high pick, important for him to be lined up in the as an inline tight end. Stribling and Kalen Black had some good days. I'm not going to spend much time on that, but it's good to hear that they're not having bad days. DJ Giddens and Seth McGowan are rotating with the first team while Jonathan Taylor is out, and Giddens had more snaps than McGowan. I think that's important. Another place where I am like very certain that there's always risk with Jonathan Taylor's ankles and everything like that. So it's important to know who the backup might be. Some jokes that I threw out there. Not anything huge here, but Aaron Glenn is coaching for his job. I think that's important. My take on that is that might lead Geno to stay out there a little bit longer. If it's like, hey, Aaron Glenn's on the fence of whether or not he's going to be back. I don't expect the Jets to have a great season, but I think it's important. So If Geno can finish out the season, that's going to be huge for his value, and the rest of the receivers, obviously. And then just more notes that the Titans said that there was a degenerative knee back in 2022 for AJ Brown. So maybe not a this year issue, but definitely in the next few years, if you're in a dynasty league or something like that. And then Tyreek Hill still needs to get healthy, but the Chiefs make some sense. So I think that's interesting also. I'm not going to spend time on Joey Porter. He might sign a big deal. There was some speculation from ESPN this morning about James Conner potentially getting traded. They listed the Bengals or Giants. Kayshon Boutte with the Raiders or Commanders. Kyle Pitts potentially being traded to the Ravens. I don't think that's as likely, but we'll see. Alvin Kamara potentially getting moved to the Packers or Bengals. It's important because if the Saints trade Kamara, they save $3 million. If they cut him, they only save like $300,000. So there's some value there. Jason La Conforta said that the Ravens are linked to another tight end and potentially should be grabbing Darren Waller. Important because right now they basically only have Mark Andrews. There's some speculation around Brandon Ayuk and Stephon Diggs potentially joining the Commanders wide receiver room. So that would be interesting and would obviously hit the value of Antonio Williams and Treylon Burks and other guys in that wide receiver room, and even probably Chig Okonkwo. More Parker Washington. I feel like I get something on him every single day, but he's in a contract year and he's pushing himself harder than ever. So he hired a full-time trainer. He's trying to get an extension. Obviously, a guy that was more of a late-round pick, so he hasn't made too much money. It would be great for him to get that extension. I think his play last year definitely warranted it, and he would get a nice deal. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, Liam Cohen spent a lot of time talking about Brian Thomas and Trevor Lawrence and their chemistry. They're really working on that deep ball. Again, I keep saying this, but Brian Thomas is playing that vertical X receiver role still, while Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington will be playing kind of that short to intermediate role. They didn't have much time to work together last offseason because Trevor Lawrence was working off shoulder recovery. There was a new scheme in place. And he was redoing his footwork as well. But it's just nice to hear that they're connecting. I think in this offense, I mean, you could still you could have 2 1,000-yard receivers on the team if they really pop. We've seen that out of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They didn't really have a third guy that mattered as much, but we've seen that. And so there's still a possibility that you get something great from Parker Washington and Brian Thomas, especially if there's high efficiency there. Brock Purdy looks pretty good, which is good to hear. He's connecting with Cowling, Stribling, and Demarcus Robinson. Again, everybody eats in San Fran whenever the receivers are out. It's the scheme. It's Brock Purdy. It's kind of all of it. Aaron Rodgers threw a 50-yard bomb to Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson's winning the wide receiver 3 role right now, and he's holding off Jeremy Bernard at the moment, but there's always a possibility that Jeremy Bernard gets that role late in the season. I'd kind of bet on that, to be quite honest. If a guy hasn't done anything in a couple of years, I think there's strong possibility that he probably won't do anything long term. Matthew Golden, will he break out? The local beat writer was saying that he's going to break out, but they don't really have like a thought process as to why, other than like clearly like playing time is a thing. I mean, if I'm making bets, I'm not betting on him. He didn't have a strong analytical profile, but I think it's nice to also be able to get a first round pick in the 110 area of the draft. So a former first round pick in the 110 area of the draft that's not going to have playing time concerns. So that's also positive. They're not really looking at running backs right now. They have Marshawn Lloyd and Chris Brooks. Also good to note, Josh Jacobs has dealt with injuries in the past, especially last year with his knee. I think it's important. The RB2 for that team is also really important, in my opinion. Joe Burrow's looking good. Chase and T. Higgins are showing a big energy shift in the team, which is great to hear. I think everybody's really bought into the system and everything that they're doing right now because they spent some actual like capital on bringing in weapons to the team. So that's exciting. I think this is important in some cases, a little bit underrated, but Eric All, they were talking about how he could be a 3-down tight end. He's worked really hard. He's coming back. He looks better than he did before. He's cutting and he's participating in 7-on-7. Really important in my opinion, because that could eat into more of Gesicki's snaps. And right now people are putting some dollar bills on Gesicki in the late round of fantasy drafts. I still like to tweet on defensive stuff. I think people aren't as interested, but this whole like star safety role is really, really important to me in terms of NFL like moxie. So that's why I keep kind of tweeting about it, and I'm excited for Caleb Downs. I'm a Cowboys fan, so I grew up there. Let's see. Other things, Michael Parsons might not be back in time for the Cowboys or Bears games, but I think that he'll probably push to get back by then, but it's all a timeline thing. This one's big to me. Tank Dell is expecting to be back in for training camp, and then I think there's a follow-on that I had today that showed he was actually participating in training camp. We'll get back to that one as soon as we get there, and I'll talk more about it. The Cowboys still have a linebacker spot available, and people are talking about potential trades. I know Jordan Brooks was thought of as somebody that could be a part of that. So I think that's an interesting one as well. I'm a Cowboys fan, so I'll always spend more time on like their defense and other things like that aren't just fantasy related. Christian Watson got an extension. It's the 15th highest wide receiver in the league. I think that's really interesting just because, we haven't seen the Packers really give anybody a really strong snap share, and it seems like they're really hunkering down on Jaden Reed and Christian Watson, Matthew Golden. So I'm expecting a big year as long as he stays healthy, because they need somebody to lead that room. It's a pretty strong ADP value if he stays healthy, in my opinion. The Bears, in their article from Kevin Fishbane, really great writer, by the way, wrote that they were hoping that Odunze could ascend to the number one option, but they also have Luther Burden. I think, in my opinion, it's going to be Luther Burden just because of the roles. Burden will get the short and intermediate. Rome will have the intermediate and deep, and that's just a higher variance role. You might see some big games, but in terms of week-to-week consistency, I think you're going to see Luther Burden do more, or be at least a stronger floor play. Drake London's been incredible with, kind of up and down quarterback play. Nothing new there. He had a big contract. We'll get to that in a minute. Mike Evans is working super hard in training camp, and people are really impressed by that. The only reason why I think that's valuable is to know that he's not just like showing up and turning into Julio Jones on the Titans or something like that, right? Dan Campbell talked about Jahmyr Gibbs getting the bell cow role. I had another tweet on that a little bit later where I listened to kind of the full quote, so we'll get to that in a minute as well. There's a big article on Chris Godwin, who missed a lot of 2025 with his ankle injury, didn't really have a chance to rehab, didn't really have a chance to actually like practice. He was doing a lot of rehabbing last year, so expects to have a big bounce back year as their primary slot receiver for the Bucks, which I think is very possible. I know most people are betting on Egbuka, and then I even like Jalen McMillan too, but I can't rule out the fact that Godwin getting a full offseason in play isn't a bad idea. Again, Tank Dell, we'll see an actual video on him, but he's going to be at training camp. George Pickens didn't show up for OTAs, but the team thinks that Pickens will be there for minicamp. I'm not worried about it personally. I think that he will be there. This is a big year for him. If he has another big year, I could see him holding out next year if they franchise tag him again. But this year, I think he needs to play ball, and then that'll translate into a big contract for him. Again, with the Cowboys, Deron Bland, I think he needs to get healthy. He's had a foot injury for 2 years now, and just massive for the Cowboys to have some secondary play. They had some of the worst numbers you could see for any throws that were under 2.5 seconds last year. Jordan Addison might get a $30 million deal, so that'd be bigger than Christian Watson. I think Christian Watson's the better football player, but with the consistency of Jordan Addison, I think that you can make the argument. The Steelers were talking about how Darnell Washington was too good to lose, but they're still not certain on what his playing time will be. Again, a lot of people are tweeting about this too, but he's kind of like the sixth offensive lineman, but also like I think his RAS score was like a perfect 10 out of 10. So he's extremely athletic still for his size. I don't see like too much fantasy appeal, but I think he's an incredible football player. Something that I think is underrated. And then going back to the 12 personnel thing, like you might not see as much Jeremy Bernard or Roman Wilson on the field as you would want from a fantasy angle. Again, as like last round best ball picks and stuff like that, you can do those picks, but I don't see as much upside as I originally did now that they've done this Darnell Washington deal. Okay, this one was a lot bigger to me. There's a clip of Trevor Lawrence wearing the same hat he had in a Matt Harmon interview, which I pointed out to Matt Harmon earlier. But Trevor Lawrence just keeps talking about Parker Washington and keeps gushing about him over and over and over again, and how dependable he is. And he was always really prepared. All of like the hardworking stuff that you want to hear from a guy that has a chip on his shoulder is exactly what you keep hearing about Parker Washington. And I think that we're going to see that translate into kind of a big season. And a big season can still be like, hey, he just got 1,000 yards and not like 1,300 yards. And that would be a very big payoff for his ADP, because where he's going right now in like at the 65 to 70 range is like a 900-yard receiver. So getting 1,000 yards and like 7 touchdowns is pretty big. And I think there's more upside than that too. Matt Harmon commented on that. So the Broncos are talking about Jalen Waddle and how have a crystal clear plan for him. I am not. This is one of my like super big breakouts. I think an incredible talent. People are talking about Devonta Smith as like, hey, he was the 1B. I think that Jalen Waddle is basically the same type of thing, and I think he has a better setup in terms of role fit and quarterback and all sorts of stuff. I think this is going to be a massive season for him. And I know projections across the board aren't like necessarily saying that, but I'm mainly thinking about those like 80 percentile plus outcomes. And I think that Jalen Waddle is going to see the field plenty. He's going to have an 80% plus route share. And I think he could do a lot of different things, including like the big plays, which is what wins fantasy matchups, but also, he'll be really big in the screen game. He'll be really big in like the downfield passing game, all sorts of different stuff. And I think he's going to unlock a lot of the offense as well. Okay, this is what I was talking about earlier. So I've had a couple of tweets on Tank Dell. There's a video from the Texans account that I posted. He was doing drills today, and a lot of people have been interested in Jalen Noel as well, and I'm one of those people. I think that he's really talented. But this is something that might put a damper on that. Tank Dell getting some reps. Obviously, he had a really gruesome knee injury, but now he's finally back in the game and seemingly going to be ready for training camp. So I think there's opportunity there that we saw a major rookie season. Maybe there's a bounce back. He missed, all of last year, but we'll see what happens. Again, on George Pickens, he's going to play basically, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be worried about the long-term deal. He's not going to get one from the Cowboys basically, but he could get franchise tag next year. Kyler's going to be the QB1. I don't think everybody pretty much knows that at this point. Sean Payton keeps talking up great things about Jalen Waddle. Okay, this is a fun article thing that I posted earlier today, but just showing the improvement of Drake London and how from 2024 to 2025 he had three routes in 2024 that were above league average, and then in 2025 he had 6 out of 8 routes that were above league average. And it just shows like and the numbers prove it, like he was so much better last year. It makes him a more all-around receiver when he can be that much above average on all sorts of different fronts. The Lions. So I watched the entire Dan Campbell press conference. He talked a lot about Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously being a bell cow. But then he also said that, he's expecting a lot out of Isaiah Pacheco later in that too. But he also mentioned that like there were a lot of big runs from Jahmyr Gibbs and gap schemes, especially between the tackles. And he was kind of juxtaposing it against like he's not basically saying he's not just an outside running back, like he can do the inside stuff too. And then I posted a stat about how good he was in man gap schemes from fantasy points. Tua was talking about Zachariah Branch as if he was Jalen Waddle. Waddle had a way bigger like downfield profile coming out of college, but the coaches did say they see Zachariah Branch doing a little bit more of a bigger route tree. London and Pitts are downfield options, and then Branch might do some of like the short area gadgety stuff. I think he's an interesting late round pick too, just because I mean they're so thin. If Pitts gets injured, we've seen him get injured a ton. You never know what opportunity presents itself, especially for a really athletic guy. I don't think it's a guy that I would think is going to be incredible, but I still think that there's like I like just placing a lot of different bets, right? Like there's opportunities, and sometimes people like um, outdo whatever our expectations are. This is big too. Sam Laporta is back at practice and he's healthy. I think that's important, especially coming off of a big injury from last year. Also important, Nick Caley was really, really gushing about David Montgomery and his ability to not only crush it in the run game, but also his route running. And that to me signals that maybe they aren't necessarily giving Woody Marks that pass down role. Jaden Blue and Phil Maffa looked solid today. Again, they're in kind of like an RB2 battle with Malik Davis. And the team continually says stuff about how they want Jaden Blue to take the role, but they also notice that there's maturity issues. Flournoy got some slot reps. I think that's mainly CeeDee Lamb's role, but I think you might see some sort of rotation. I think Flournoy is like locked in wide receiver 3 this year with a lot of upside if George Pickens actually did miss time, or CeeDee Lamb or something like that too. Again, Ryan Flournoy building chemistry with Dak Prescott. And that's it for today. I think I did more than 10 minutes. It was 20 minutes, but fun times. I'm going to try to do this every single day. If I can't do it every day, I'll try to catch everybody up on the big news at least. All right. That's it.